Hey friends, this is Eunice. Thank you for joining me today. Today I have on my husband Chris, and we just wanted to share a little with you guys about just this past year and something the Lord has done in my life, which is start me on a health journey where I started working out. I have not really worked out since I was in high school, and so it has been a bit of a journey. Thankfully, Chris has been on this journey for several years now, and so he was really able to help me in this. So I really wanted us to have a conversation about it and share with you guys if it just encourages any of you out there who want to also start in your health journey. So, let me jump in. Chris, is there anything you wanted to share in the beginning?
Yeah, so just before we start, I just want to even help to frame this conversation, and I think in two ways. First, biblically, and then pastorally. So, you know, I know many of our listeners, and as well as Eunice and myself, like we want to be faithful to the Word of God, right? And so, like, are there Bible verses that talk about like physical fitness or physical health? Like aside from healing, but like, exhorting us to take care of our physical bodies. And I'm not aware of too many, so if you guys know of some, feel free to shoot them over to us. But I think the best one that I can come up with is from Paul's letter to one of Paul's letters to Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 4, in verse 7. Paul says, have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. And so, you know, I think his main point is exhorting Timothy toward godliness. And so that's the main thing. That's the important thing. And he's saying give your most of your energy toward that, because it has value in this life and in the life to come. Physical training, we all know like these bodies are, that God has given to us, like on one sense we're to steward them, but they won't last forever either. And so like that's not all there is to life. And so I think his exhortation is pretty balanced. It's interesting. He doesn't say it's of no value, right? Physical training is of no value. So don't, because he could have easily said, don't waste your time with that. Don't bother. It doesn't matter. Your body's, it's just dust anyway, dust to dust, you're going to return, so it's like, he could have easily said that, but he doesn't. He says it's of some value. So it's not everything, but it's not nothing either. And so I think, biblically we can make the case that like, we should take reasonable care of our bodies. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. And then pastorally, I just also want to say, number one, I know that, physical fitness or whatever it is can be such a sensitive topic. There's so much shame that either our society puts on us or we might just put it on ourselves, related to our bodies, related to our size or shape or weight or whatever, the way we eat or whatever. And, I grew up as a kid who really struggled with my weight. My weight went up and down so much, and I was really overweight at times. And so I totally relate to that struggle. I'm well acquainted with, the shame that can come from those things and the negative self-esteem, negative self-image, like all those things. Like I'm well aware of that. So of course I always want to be sensitive to that. And the last thing that Eunice or I would want to do is, cause anyone to feel that shame over your body. So that's one thing. And then of course in this era of COVID, I know people are already under so much stress, so much pressure. There's a million things, complications to our lives, or tragedy or grief or pain that we're bearing with. And so the last thing I want to do is add yet another thing that you're like, oh yeah, I know I should be paying more attention to that, but I just don't have the bandwidth, or, and that's totally understandable. Like we totally get it. So the last thing I want to do is add more stress to your life. But at the same time, the benefits of physical fitness, it's not just physical. Like I have found that there's spiritual benefits, emotional, mental. And so, if you are finding yourself under tremendous stress, again, it's not to put an additional burden on you, but maybe some of the tips we share actually might help you. It actually might help you process some of the stress you're feeling or whatever. So anyway, we want this to be a help to you, not a burden. So just wanted to say that on the front end.
Right, thanks. So, my first question I have for you is, what inspired you to get more serious about your fitness, and was there a defining moment or something like that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably a few, but the main one that comes to mind, it was about actually 7 years ago now. We were getting ready to move our family overseas, and we were traveling, just seeing friends and family before we moved. And I just remember it was one day we were at your sister's house, and you and your sister and all of our kids and all of her kids had just like literally walked out the door to go to like Chuck E. Cheese for the afternoon just to do something fun. And so, I'm an introvert, so I'm like looking forward to like having the house to myself for an hour or two, so I'm getting ready to just relax. I walk over to the fridge to get a drink, and I wasn't doing anything strenuous. It was literally just a normal just movement, but I just bent down to grab something, and then in that moment my back like spasmed. It was like a muscle spasm, I guess, and I've had injuries before, but I've never experienced anything like this
Yeah.
before. And so it was like, it would be like a minute, maybe 30 seconds, felt like an hour, honestly, but it was probably 30 seconds to a minute where my back would be spasming so intensely that I just couldn't do anything, and I was in so much pain. And then eventually it would subside. But the second I tried to move again, like just even to move an inch, you know, it started up again, and then that whole cycle would repeat. And I was a little stubborn, so I kept trying to like at least get over to the living room so I could like turn on the TV, because like what am I gonna do? I'm like stuck on the kitchen floor in front of the refrigerator, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I couldn't do anything. I was just stuck. So I kept trying to crawl, but eventually I just gave up because I was like, I just can't handle this pain. So, and here's the thing, like at that time I was about, what was it, like 35 years old? I forget. Anyway, I was probably in my mid 30s at that time. So when I was younger, in my 20s, I was on staff at a church, and 4 other pastors on staff with me. They were all older than me, some 10 years, some 15 years, and some even more than that. But I remember one of them in particular would always tell me like, hey, like you can probably get away with like the way you eat and like not exercising, for a little while, like, but once you hit, I forget the age he said, but like 30, 35, something like that. He said, your body changes, like you have to be more intentional about taking care of your body. And it wasn't that I didn't believe him. Like I totally believed him, but it wasn't urgent to me at the time.
Right.
So I just kind of like, ignored it, but I did keep that advice or that wisdom in the back of my mind. And so I think just when that, that muscle spasm moment happened, I think that was the moment where it all clicked, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the moment he was talking about. I can't just get away with how I've lived up until now anymore. I probably need to address my fitness. And so that began a real serious journey for me, just like, making changes to my diet, starting to exercise more. And those who know me know, like, I have never been known for like a healthy diet. And to this day, I'm not saying like I'm a health freak by any means. Like no one would mistake me for that. But I have definitely been more intentional about like making adjustments to my body, as well as adding in like exercise. So anyway.
Yeah, that was a crazy time. And I will say, even like moving overseas at that time, it was like the stress we were under. It was like a blitz, just getting our house ready, selling our stuff, driving across the country, and packing. So that was a crazy time. Yeah.
So what about for you? Was there a moment for you that kickstarted the journey?
Yeah. So I would say around the time when the COVID lockdowns were happening, I was reading articles about like, people gaining weight in this time, a more sedentary lifestyle now that we're all homebound. And I would read those articles, and I remember telling you, Chris, I'd be like, oh, we'll be fine. We had gotten this free elliptical machine that one of our neighbors was giving away like 6 months before, which ended up being a huge blessing. But I remember I was like, I'll just do some steps on the elliptical and I'll be fine with my diet and things like that. And Chris would give me these little like nudges, like, are you sure it's going to be okay? Because I had a very haphazard approach to my fitness, as I do in other things in my life. But so I kept saying, oh, I'll be fine. Don't worry about it, babe. Like, it's going to be fine. But as the weeks of COVID and the lockdowns just continued, I was realizing my clothes were not fitting the same. And I was, in fact, gaining weight. And so that's kind of when I was more aware that maybe I needed to make some lifestyle changes. But honestly, this is kind of a funny wake up call to me. I started watching this Korean drama. I've been really into Korean dramas during COVID. It's called Oh My Venus. And in that drama, it's about a overweight girl and she meets this fitness trainer. And I was watching it, doing the elliptical some days, and I remember thinking, oh, these excuses that she gives her trainer are literally the same exact excuses I've been giving Chris about not being more intentional about my fitness. And so it was kind of like a wake up call to me. Also, again, not fitting in my clothes and really realizing we are in a more sedentary time during this lockdown. Our kids aren't even like walking the halls of their school anymore, or
Yeah.
I'm not even walking the steps to go get the car in the parking lot anymore. All those things I was realizing, oh, like if we aren't intentional in this time, it's really going to bite us in the end. So that's kind of the wake up call I had.
Yeah.
So when we were overseas, you ran a half marathon. So even though you didn't have much prior training in running at all, what made you want to do it, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so truthfully, I don't know if I remember exactly what motivated me. There was probably a few things. At the time we were living overseas with a small community that we were doing life and ministry with. And so I remember some of them were planning to run or wanted to run and train. So it was kind of like a community thing. So partly I think I just agreed just because others were doing it. But truthfully, I think, that took place about a year, or not even less than a year, from the events that I just mentioned that caused me to really begin this fitness journey in earnest. And so I think truthfully, I would think I was just feeling so good physically that I was like, maybe I should just try this. It wasn't something that I ever, had desired to do. It wasn't like on my bucket list or anything. I actually didn't really like running, to be honest. But I think I was just feeling so like surprisingly good physically that I was like, oh, maybe I can try this and just see what I'm capable of. So yeah, I think there was something, enticing about, just that challenge of, pushing your body to a new limit that, it hadn't been able to do before. But I think my biggest takeaway, honestly, from the experience was the training for it, because the half marathon was taking place at the end of April, I believe. But that meant that most of the training was going to happen through the winter months. And the city we were living in, the way the winter was it didn't snow that much. It did occasionally, but most of the time, actually, if there was precipitation, it would just stay like this freezing rain. So to me, that's actually worse than snow, because snow, at least, like, it doesn't like stick to you, but like
And it's pretty.
yeah, you walk outside in the city that we were living in, like you go out in the wintertime, like you're getting wet, and then it's freezing cold temperatures, and so you're just like freezing and wet, which to me is like probably the most miserable weather condition anyway. But so anyway, I had set a training schedule, a few times a week to go and run, and right from the beginning, there would be a reason not to do it, right? Like the weather was too cold, or it was raining, or it was maybe even snowing. And for the first few times I was like, oh, I can just postpone, I can just cancel one of these, that's not a big deal. But very quickly I started to realize, oh my gosh, if I just keep canceling or keep postponing, I will never train, or I just won't be ready in time for this half marathon. So I just had to make the decision. I remember like very clearly this moment where it just clicked and I said, okay, from this point forward, no matter what, I am going to go on my training runs, even if I'm freezing, even if it's wet, even if it's snowing. And I just did. And I remember I would say the majority of the times that I was training, it was raining or it was snowing even, and I would just do the workout anyway. And I think what that solidified in me was just a habit and a discipline, and really not allowing any excuses to stop me. I think that was a big thing, because I'm sure you can all relate, but like it's so easy to make excuses not to. But I think that really solidified in me just a discipline of like, no matter what, I'm gonna just go do it.
Yeah. Well, the kids and I were so proud of you. There were definitely many days where Chris would be leaving the house and I just didn't want him to go running because it was freezing cold.
Yeah, and truthfully, I didn't want to either.
And I was worried about him and if he'd catch a cold from that. But honestly, the Lord sustained your health. And even as you're talking right now, I want to share a quick testimony. I don't know if you remember this, but right before the race, you injured your knee. And after all that training, we were wondering, we were wondering, is Chris going to be able to do this? I remember our team came around him and prayed for his knee, and the Lord healed his knee so that he actually could run that half marathon. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Not that it wasn't challenging, because I remember you struggling through that race, but we were just all cheering you on with our signs in the end, and it was actually incredible. So thank you so much for sharing about that today. And we just wanted to share this with you guys. It's just part of our story. And this is part 1. And we want to do a part 2 just to share more practical things and more of our stories. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that everyone watching has an amazing day. Bye-bye.